Hello, hello. This is an art gripe, if you don't know. It's a video where I make a drawing and then I do some commentary over it. So it's sort of freeform, this isn't too heavily scripted, but if you've never seen it before, that's what's going on. This is also a Lower Decks video, where I'm talking about Star Trek Lower Decks, although in typical fashion for me, I'll probably start babbling about other things in the process, to the point where you might even wonder, wasn't he talking about Lower Decks? And no, I'm not, so be prepared for that. Alright, so quickly, Lower Decks is amazing. It starts awkwardly, but becomes one of the best Star Trek shows. That's my general consensus about Lower Decks. So if you're looking for that, there it is. Now, this video is going to be messy. Messier than normal. It was messy, I should say. Originally, this was going to be something that I did with my girlfriend, because we had been watching Lower Decks and she got really obsessive with it, and we've actually watched it twice together. I think I've watched Lower Decks probably about 6 times by now, in total, showing it to other people and so on. But she told me recently that the desire to do it had passed, because originally I drew this picture back in May, so it's been a long time. So I've just been sitting on the files, waiting this entire time, for the chance to be able to do a recording about it. It's just been so long that we decided, just go ahead and do it on your own. So this is what I'm doing. I chose Tendi and Ta'ana, these two characters, because I know my audience. We are perverts. And Ta'ana is my girlfriend's favorite. She really loves the angry, cantankerous, grumpy kitty. And I think even now, she still has the, still has a picture of her crouched like a cat upon her desk as her Discord icon. The two characters will factor into the commentary later, I promise. Now, I have already recorded this as well, the commentary for this, a few days ago. And then I had to re-render it 3 times for different reasons. And then I had to amend the recording twice as well. So I'm throwing all of it away. And I'm writing notes now, which I normally don't do for art gripes, because otherwise it will be all over the place. Okay, so I'm re-recording it again because of a couple things. The first is that, 1, it wasn't enough about Lower Decks, it was, just me rambling. The second was, it was a bit of a downer because of the nature of what I start talking about, which you'll see later, and I was not in a good mood at the time. Okay, so, second, oddly, because of some weird Pokemon news that came out a few days ago. Which Game Freak, the company that does Pokemon, had a bunch of leaks, and as a result a bunch of information that was only privy to people inside of the workroom, their offices, got leaked to the rest of the internet. I'll explain that later. It'll come into play, don't worry. Okay, so, let me explain. I released the O'Brien video, which is my first Star Trek essay video, and it did really, really poorly on the first day. 1,200 something views. That sent me into a panic about the general future of the channel, because it's getting more and more difficult to get views on videos, not just for me, but for just everyone. And that's sort of what the video is going to be about, in a sense. But it got me thinking about Federation culture, and how that relates to that, and I'll talk about that in a second. And so I talked about that mainly in the video, in my original commentary. So in the process of me panicking about this, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do something I haven't done in years. I'm going to take the video URL and I'm going to link it around some places. Because one of the things about growing your channel, and this is the reason why I haven't done this in such a long time, is you have to manually distribute it. You can't just upload something to YouTube and then hope that people show up. You can't just make a website and then link it on Google and just hope that people show up. That's not how things work. You have to sort of identify where the internet bubbles are of people that would be interested in the thing that you just made, and then go there and then distribute it manually, which sometimes can get you in trouble because people get angry that you're, shilling your own content, but it's still content. So as long as you're being earnest about how much you enjoy the thing, then probably the people that are there that already enjoy the thing will probably see it and appreciate that you posted it there. And as more people come in, that will help to grow whatever brand that you have. And if there are larger content creators that already have a much larger, internet bubble around them, that have more people watching their thing, then they might mention your thing, and that just makes your audience grow as well, and so forth and so on. This is how creating popularity online works. And I have not done that in a long time. Anyways. So Game Freak leaked a bunch of stuff, Pokemon related, and they had people talking about Pokemon-human relations, quote-unquote. That resulted in a surge in people viewing my Pokemon videos, the cartoons. And I'm the guy that makes the funny animations about the professor having the Pokemon and it suggesting that they're a little bit too close to their Pokemon, and it's, the joke. So that resulted in a general surge of people watching some of my videos, just in general. Unfortunately, most of those were Brian video, which is good. The Pokemon videos, which is fine. I don't make much money from those because they're flagged by YouTube as being inappropriate. And even more fortunately, tracking back to the Naruto video again, which probably always gets the most consistent views, which is very bad because I make zero money off of that because Toei stole that one a long time ago. So anytime that one gets ad revenue, Toei just steals all of it, even though it's transformative and etc. and so on. But back in the day, YouTube was even more lax about just, if a Japanese company, especially a Japanese company, because their laws are a little bit different, wanted to just take one of your videos, they could just steal it. Even if it just had like a single second of music from some song or just a single frame of something from a show, they could just take it, and there's nothing that you could do about it. And YouTube just didn't care. And it wasn't until Totally Not Mark had a situation with Toei, where it just resulted in a massive backlash from tons of people, that YouTube eventually said, okay, we were just bending over backwards for Japanese companies, but this is resulting in so much lost revenue and so much lost time for us that we're going to actually push back against the legalese that the Japanese companies have been enjoying for so long, and we're going to actually do our jobs and protect the people that are actually making the content. Because we can't operate as a platform if the people that are trying to do transformative content can't do it. So, point being, Naruto video went up in views. I don't care. Sometimes I think about just deleting that video, but it's, whatever. It brings in people sometimes. One of the unfortunate realities of making content on the channel is that videos that are just straight up positive and have no contention around them tend to not do very well. Because the way that YouTube works is it looks to see, are people commenting on your video? And people that watch your video and go, I enjoy that, I have nothing to say about it, I just enjoyed everything about it, they don't say anything. But people that are, angry for whatever the reasons, will always leave comments on your video, telling you how stupid you are or why you're wrong about something, or if you leave in like one little nitpicky thing and people want to nitpick on that, then they'll just leave comments on that. And YouTube doesn't care what the comment is, it just cares that it's there, that your engagement is up. So if your engagement is high, then it will continue showing that video to everyone. But I'll get more into that in a bit. For now, just understand this is the context of what I will be talking about now, and also what I was talking about in the previous commentary, and why this video would otherwise be as messy as it was. Now, originally, I was talking about how in Star Trek, there is no money, there's only notoriety. Officers don't work for money. There's no jobs in Star Trek, really. You have a career, but you don't earn anything for doing your job. There is no money. There is for like Ferengi and such, but otherwise on Earth, for humans, there's no money. There is an episode in Orville, which is transparently just modeled after TNG specifically, where they say that the currency of the future is, I don't remember their exact words, but it's basically cultural recognition. And I always found that to be much more honest than it is in Star Trek. In Orville, it's very overt that what they're working for is to be recognized by everyone around them. Whereas in Star Trek, they never really get into it. I find that to be very similar to being a content creator. Because modern online content is incredibly saturated. It is not like it was like even, in the 2000s, even 2010s. Because back then you could be the one guy doing animations, for a specific thing. And it was very easy to be seen. These days, there is tons of content online these days. I'll give this an example. Netflix once said that their main competition is not Hulu when they were pressed about it. It is Fortnite, and which confused a lot of people. But that's because all money revolves around people investing their personal time into whatever it is that you're doing. So their main competition was Fortnite because people were wasting their time, at night playing Fortnite as opposed to watching something. And that's true of basically everything. Think about the things that you do every day. You might watch a little bit of, YouTube or TV, whatever it is that you're doing, a movie. You might play a little bit of games, and that's your free time. Otherwise, it'll probably be, work related, or things that you're doing in the background of work. And that what you're doing day to day is going to be very, very consistent for the most part. Like, you're not going to suddenly not watch TV and in favor of that do some other wild thing like travel across country on a whim. Just whatever it happens to be. And the nature of what you consume is not going to change much either. If you're someone that really loves Star Trek and you're watching Star Trek videos, you're going to watch Star Trek videos. And you have other interests and you'll dip into those. You're not going to suddenly start watching people play World of Warcraft on Twitch or something. You're not going to. So, whenever you're making content online, you have to be worried about what are people watching, why are they watching it, how often do they watch it. Which is why there are a lot of new TV shows these days, for example, like Netflix and so on, but they are barely making any money. It's incredibly saturated. There are tons of new shows being released, every year, every month. There's just something new coming up, and it's always getting canceled. It's a persistent problem right now because it's the cable TV problem. Everything's very thin. Like back in the day of network television, whenever I grew up, there were only a few TV stations you had to worry about. And in my parents' day, you had like 3, I think it was. And that was it. There were 3 TV stations, and if you wanted to watch something, you went to one of those 3 things. It was like having 3 YouTube channels, if you think about it that way. Whereas these days, of course, instead of having 3, or what it was in my day, which is more like, a maximum of 10, I still had to use air-to-air, so you could sort of get things that were in different cities, but the quality of the transmission was very bad. But these days, there are effectively an infinite amount of them. I could spend the next year trying to figure out all the different platforms and the ways of interacting with them, and I would not find all of them. There's just too many. It's the cable TV problem. That's what happened with cable TV. You went from a network television where you only had like 10 or something channels to cable where you had, hundreds of them, which is why cable channels would pop up and then die and then go away, because there was not enough demand for it, and as a result, they just could not make money. The quality of the thing that they were making may have been high, but their viewership was just not good enough to sustain it. And if you look at TV ratings for things, something that is considered to be very good now, that has a lot of faith in its programming, will have a very small amount of ratings compared to something that was considered to be a failure on network television back in the 90s, despite the viewership of it being, like a dozen times over what it would be now. Because just the expectations of what is success were different back then. So these days, you have movies, YouTube, television, all being divided into swollen mega channels, or these giant blockbusters. But alongside them are the hyper niche channels, or the movies that are like really low budget, but very focused on doing something more artistic or something more specific. Basically, everyone is competing for video games are the same way, where you have giant big budget games that obviously have millions of dollars pumped into them, versus little indie projects. And there's not that much room in between those two things. You're either aiming for it being a huge blockbuster, or you're aiming for it to being something very specific. In addition, for something like YouTube, for example, people don't use subscriptions anymore, really. They tend to only check the front page. They don't use their subscriptions tab. So even though they will like someone specifically, there's just so much content that they're going through all the time that they can't afford to, parse, even for the people that they're subscribed to, the things that they really want to see. So they're just relying on YouTube to just disseminate that for them. So as a result, even if you're subscribed to someone, you still have to rely on YouTube saying it's worth watching. And unfortunately, because of the way that YouTube works, creators have gotten used to doing little tricks like, say, on their shorts, unchecking a box that says, show your video to your subscribers. That is, you upload the video, but it's basically just unlisted as far as subscribers go. And they do that because if your subscribers don't watch your video, YouTube assumes that even for your most dedicated fans, they don't care about the thing that you just uploaded. It's not worth seeing. And whenever it determines that, it says, oh, well, if the people that obsess over this person's content don't want to watch it, that must mean that the people that are not subscribed to them especially would not care about it. So as a result, it doesn't showcase that video to anyone. So whenever you upload a video and you don't have it shown to your subscribers, then it doesn't have that problem. YouTube just sees, oh, a lot of people are watching this. So if a lot of people are watching it, I'll show it to more people. And if your subscribers that normally would be watching that video also are viewing it, then it's just that much more popular. So it'll just keep exacerbating and showcasing that video. So you see the problem of modern, technology and how things are working. You have known IPs versus new IPs, people wanting guaranteed success versus experimental success. And for people that are sitting there watching things on their toilet, they're wanting something that is guaranteed to engage with them versus something that, might take more time or something that might not be worth the bother of queuing it up, considering that they're only going to be there for a few seconds sometimes. So that's why you, on one hand, see videos that are, 1 to 5 minutes long, or videos that are 3 hours long, because those are two completely different types of content people are looking for. They're looking for something to play in the background over a long period of time, or something to watch very quickly and incidentally that they don't care about, something very disposable. All current systems and technology, and the way that people operate in their day-to-day lives these days, works against new creators, and it focuses on garbage or viral videos from people that you don't know or care about. Because think about a lot of the shorts or TikToks or whatever that you watch. Most of them, you don't care about the person that made it at all. Even if you're, subscribed to them or you follow them, and you're loosely aware of who makes this certain kind of content, them as a person, you don't care that they exist. If the exact style of content continued to come out of that channel, but the person behind it, just left, they sold it to another person, they died, whatever, then you don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to you. Because the content is the thing that you care about, you never cared about the person behind it. And in many cases, it doesn't even matter what the content was, because you're watching something that is clearly stolen content. There's those things where you'll watch like a cute animal video, and at the very beginning of the video is some AI voice going, so-and-so did this, da-da-da-da-da, watch this happen, because the video itself was too short. So they just basically loop the video with one time them babbling over it. It's something you just don't care about. But you don't care. What's the matter? Because you're there to watch the cute animal for a few seconds while you're on the commode. And who is that video from? Like, which uploader? You don't know. Who cares? Because it's all the same thing. It's all garbage. It's just there to be consumed very quickly, then thrown away and forgotten about. In contrast, you have things like Twitch channels, or some YouTube channels are like this too, where they treat themselves like TV stations. In the sense of, if you're watching a streamer, most of the time you're not paying any attention to what they're doing. It's just noise in the background. It's just something to occupy sort of your headspace a little bit ever so often. And if something funny happens, they start laughing about something, you'll glance over, check out what they're doing. And then that's it. Otherwise, it's just sort of there. For Twitch especially, you have to turn yourself into a TV station if you want to maintain success. If you work every day at the same hours, Twitch likes that. If you stream at the exact same time every single day, Twitch really likes that. But the very second that you stop doing that, like you take a day off, even one day, your ad revenue plummets consistently. Because Twitch wants you to be that TV station. It wants that consistency. It wants users to say, it's X time to watch so-and-so. And if they go there and you aren't there, Twitch hates that. So your life just becomes you being a garbage TV station of background audio for things that don't matter, for content that really is not content. It's just noise. This modern content creation is sort of a creative dystopia. It's awful, if you think about it. Like, every last element of it is working against new creators, and it's working against even, like, mid-level creators that are doing something more specific. Like, for me, someone that is making these more prolonged essay videos, it's sort of okay. But I can't upload them that fast, so that I can't really make that much money that quickly. And more importantly, since I have such a diverse range of things that I talk about, then I can't be a TV station. Most YouTube channels are like that, where if you go there, you're going to assume, well, this guy uploads specifically videos of him petting cats in Japan. I know a guy that does that. I'm subscribed to him. That's why I thought of it. But that's all he does. He doesn't have some random video where he talks about Star Trek because he also loves Star Trek. And in my case, I do videos like this, where I talk about Star Trek. I might talk about Harry Potter at some point. I might talk about Star Wars. I might be doing an art video. It might be an animation. It might be an essay video. You just never know with me. Because when it comes to my content, I'm the content. And I am a person that has a wide range of things that I do. And most people don't want that. They want the security of going to my channel and knowing this is what it is. So in the past, whenever I've uploaded something brand new, people would sometimes say, well, maybe you should have a channel dedicated to just the art gripes, and then you have one that's dedicated to the animations. But I've never wanted to run 6 or 7 or a dozen different YouTube channels. I don't want to do that. That's miserable. I'm not switching accounts constantly, trying to figure out which one this needs to go to, and then trying to prop that channel up and running those as well. I'm not popular enough for that to work. I would need a huge team of people, and I don't have the money to do that. If I had my own writers and all I had to do was just read the content, oh, that would be great. If I could just be one of those people that just acts as a TV host. There's channels like that. There's a guy that, I can't remember his name. He's a bald guy with a beard and glasses. And, he's the host on a bunch of different channels, like Mega Projects and Business Blaze, I think. I can't remember the name of them. But you'll recognize him. You've probably seen him here and there. But effectively, he has writers, and he just acts as the guy that reads what they write. Which must be a great gig. I wish I could do that. That would be much more relaxing, because then I wouldn't have to worry about needing the... Like, whenever I make something, it's just me. I have to worry about... coming up with the idea, writing it, perfecting that writing structure, gathering all the resources, converting all the files. Like in the case of the Star Trek video, the O'Brien video, I had to not only find digital versions of all the series that I have on, DVD and so on, but I also had to reconvert them out of like container files into MP4 so that I could use it in DaVinci, and then I had to edit them and also make sure that the editing is fine and just everything. It's absolutely everything, including like marketing or anything beyond that. And in some cases, like the O'Brien video, I'll upload it. It gets 1,200 videos because I didn't do any marketing for it. And then I suffer the consequences of it. The video itself is good. I love the video. It turned out great. But you need to do everything. And if you don't have a team, if you're not a mega channel that has tons of money coming in all the time, You can't support that. Especially if you're a new creator and you upload a video and you get one view and it's your view, how do you get more views? If YouTube doesn't show that to anyone, you just don't. And there's nothing you can do about it. It is creative dystopia. Alright. In Lower Decks, we're here. We're finally here. In Lower Decks, the premise is that the ship that you're watching is not a Federation flagship. It's not like the original series or TNG where you're watching the Enterprise, the flagship of the Federation. In Lower Decks, you're watching the Cerritos, which is a California-class ship. It is a C-grade Federation ship. Its job is Second Contact, which is sort of a joke because First Contact is this big, oh, we're meeting an alien species for the first time, anything could happen. In Second Contact, you're just showing up and seeing how they're doing. So, on the Cerritos, even the main staff, like their Picards, their Datas, their Worfs, and so on, their Ciscos, their Kirks, their Spocks, their main staff, they don't matter to the rest of the Federation. They just may as well not exist. People don't even know their names. Captain Freeman, which is the captain of the Cerritos, is really preoccupied with being noticed by Starfleet. Not to the point where it's her only character trait or anything. The show's pretty good about that. But there's many scenes of her getting gassed up by her second in command and so on, talking about whether or not she will be seen by Starfleet or whether the mission that they're on will have notoriety and so on. Her daughter, which this gets revealed really early, but one of the main characters, Mariner, is her daughter. We know that pretty much instantly. That's not a spoiler. By the way, no spoilers for this video. Her daughter is obsessed with avoiding promotions. Her whole thing is that she's very capable, and it takes multiple seasons to get to this point. But sort of the mystery is why she is so preoccupied with staying in the Lower Decks and being an ensign. But that's her whole character. It centers around her avoiding promotions. Another main character, Brad Boimler, is obsessed with getting promoted. He is also an ensign, but everything he does is centered around how will I get noticed by people? How do I do a better job? How can I send ranks as fast as I possibly can? He is incredibly capable, and that's part of the joke, is that he's actually a really good officer most of the time. But he's also sort of a nervous wreck. So in the process of trying to show off, he ends up self-sabotaging because he's just too wired. So all the characters are sort of oriented around the same problem of how do I gain notoriety? Because like I said, the currency of the future is recognition. In Star Trek, that's what you're wanting. You're not getting any money for doing your job. You want to be seen. And that, to me, is very similar to what we have now with like YouTube and so on. Again, no spoilers, but there is a plot point where an admiral, in true Starfleet fashion, there's always an evil admiral doing something, engages in a conspiracy to push a project forward. I'm trying to be non-specific. Because their entire reason for doing so was that they had hit a wall for admirals. Like, once you get to be an admiral, then that's it, as far as recognition goes. So why did he do the thing that he did? He did it because he needed to break that wall and have some form of recognition. And that hinged on him doing something bad. In Star Trek, for people that are obsessed with their careers, that's the only thing that they think about most of the time. Now, is that actually important? No. None of that's important. Survival for humans in Star Trek is pretty much guaranteed. 100%. If you're a human, you're born a human, you're fine. You can go to Earth, you can get free food, you get free housing, you don't have to worry about anything. Even the Maquis, which is a plot point in the end of TNG and in Deep Space Nine, the Maquis are humans, usually, that are colonists that are living near the Cardassian Empire's border. And I have a lot of criticisms of that I'm not going to get into because otherwise it's an entirely different video. But my opinion is that they are basically spoiled people who wanted a very specific world that they had usually been on for about 10 years. It's not like an ancient world that they've been on for 1,000 years or 100 years or anything. They just got there. But they really want that world specifically, and that's the reason why they're fighting for it. They get involved in a covert war against even the Federation. They start even attacking the Federation because they really want to be colonists on this specific planet. And why do people colonize things in Star Trek? Usually it's because they're not pushed out because they need money or something. There is no money. In every case, they just want the challenge of colonizing a new world. And that's it. That's the only reason why they're out there. Otherwise, all the Maquis, if they wanted to, even the ones that are non-human in many cases, since they're Starfleet Federation citizens, they could go back to any of these other worlds that have already been established and just get free resources and live a happy life of just doing whatever they want to until the day they die. But they don't do that because they want that challenge, and they're willing to apparently kill a bunch of people because they want the challenge of living on this one specific dirt ball that has nothing on it. I don't like the Maquis. But anyways, in the Federation, some problems are real. There's the Borg, there's Romulans, there's Klingons, there's caretakers that will sometimes just pluck you out of the Badlands and so on. There are natural space disasters. There are things that want to talk to whales, and they'll go to Earth and try to destroy Earth because they really want to talk to whales. Star Trek is it's kind of a weird show. Most problems in the show are caused by unrest, like ennui and such. That's people that have objectives and they're trying to fulfill those objectives. They're not really problems. Like, sure, there are Borg and such sometimes, but most of the time the things that people are doing are just caused by themselves. They want something and they want to attain that or achieve or whatever it is. Like, in many cases, they're exploring a region of space that they have no business even being in. It's not their region of space. They're just there wondering what's out here. And that's the whole premise of the whole series. So, I was thinking about all that because I was worried about the YouTube channel, my income, and so on. My Patreon is relatively stable. I could make way more money and be in a much better state, but it's fine. But whenever you're only getting 1,200 views on a new YouTube video, that is terrifying. So you can imagine, my response. For some people, 1,200 views is great. It's just that for someone that's their livelihood. And there were cases in the past where I could upload a new video and hit 100,000 views pretty easily, because the internet bubble that I was on was more secure, and my viewership was more secure, and I was, just in a better state. And there were fewer things competing with my time. There was no TikTok. There were no YouTube Shorts. So whenever someone wanted to watch something, they only had a limited number of things to go to, and my fan base was younger at the time, and now I would have to garner a new fan base of people whose age group is so low, I don't even know what they're looking for anymore. It's just a different environment. But you can see where I was coming from. It's very, very scary. It would be like owning a grocery store and, it was fine for a long time. And then one day, you only get 5 customers walking in. And at that point, you're wondering, what am I doing wrong? What's happening? This is terrifying. What do I do? That's what was going through my head. Now, if my Patreon is relatively secure, if I had infinite money, I would still be really preoccupied with doing a good job, for different reasons. Think about it in terms for yourself. If you had infinite money, if you were in Star Trek, even not in Star Trek, just your life now, but you didn't have to worry about money anyway. You were, trust fund baby or something. You had infinite money. What would you be worrying about day to day? You would still have worries, because this is just how people are. What would your goals be? What would you be trying to achieve? For most people, most of the time, they're just preoccupied with just managing their everyday lives. Trying to go into a job that they don't like, because they're just trying to make just enough money to stay alive. And that's just most people's lives. For most of my life, that's what it's been. It's just been moving from one bad job to another, trying anything I could in order to garner enough money just to keep myself afloat, because it's so hard to make money in this world, especially in America. Like, there are young people in my Discord that are trying to find a job. I feel really bad for them because even for me, as someone that was born in 82, that went to college, dropped out, got like a job working factory, Walmart, and so on, then went back to college, got a degree, came out of college, I discovered there were no opportunities. I had a degree in graphic design, and I eventually got a job in graphic design, but that job was effectively just a data entry guy, and they wanted someone that just so happened to be able to do graphic design on the side. So I was making the income of someone that didn't have a degree either. Like, I was doing data entry work and getting an income on that level. Whereas I should have been making like $10,000, $20,000 more than that, considering my degree. And for people now, it's even worse. I don't know how people get jobs. I just don't. I don't know how people make money at all. If something, this is one of the things I worry about. If something happened to the channel, or, just people just stop caring about me, and, the Patreon goes defunct, and it gets so low that I just can't pay to keep myself alive anymore, I don't know what I'll do, because I can't put I was a content creator for 10, 20 years on a resume. No one's going to care. That's not going to translate into a job anywhere. So, the current economic state for people like me, or like you in most cases, is not good at all. This is a terrible environment for this sort of thing. The point being, that is what we are preoccupied with day to day. Making money, keeping ourselves going. If you had infinite money, what would you be doing with your time? For a lot of us, we think, oh man, I would just play games every day. I would take trips. Eventually, you'll get sick of that. You will. And eventually, you will need some sort of motivating thing that keeps you going. And that's what Star Trek is. All of this is very human nature, because I'm not trying to get too dire here. This is the reason why I said that my last video was a bit of a downer, because of the way I was delivering this information. But life has no inherent meaning. For some of you, you might disagree because of like religious reasons, or just personal philosophical things, whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, life does not have an inherent meaning to it. The meaning of life is basically just whatever we project onto it. A lot of things like depression are caused by, this is not the case every time, obviously, just one element of it, can be caused by having a feeling that you have no control of your life, or no direction, or you're trapped. Some people are totally happy being completely alone in their life, and they will be until the day that they die. But there are also some people that are rich, and they're incredibly depressed because they can't form human connections, like ones that are authentic. A lot of life is finding value in something, and then enjoying the pursuit of whatever that happens to be. It's identifying, this is important to me for whatever reason, and figuring out why that is important to you, and then trying to achieve it. When you don't have that, life falls apart and you feel that lack of meaning, because you can't project anything onto it. That's just the human condition, and that's life in general. In Star Trek, I imagine most of the humans that are around are challenging themselves because there's just no meaning otherwise. There's nothing to work for. There's even an episode early on in TNG where they unfreeze people that are from the 20th century, because we're under the illusion that freezing people actually works. It doesn't. You just die. But rich people don't want to hear that, so. But they unfreeze a bunch of people, and there's one guy who's really adamant he needs to talk to his broker. He needs to make sure that his money is secure, because, 20th century. And they have to make it clear, there's no money anymore. Your firm that you're so preoccupied with went extinct a long time ago. You have nothing. And he poses to Picard, well, what do people work for? And Picard tries to make it clear, we work to embetter ourselves, and he gives a Star Trek speech. Most people are like that in the future of Star Trek. They are just finding some sort of meaning that is personalized to them and then pursuing it. That sounds fantastic, and it is amazing as long as you are watching specifically the command staff of the Enterprise, the Federation flagship of humanity. But whenever you switch that up and look at the lower decks, See, this is where I'm going with this. If you switch that up and you look at the lower decks, the show specifically as well, and the people on the Cerritos, or the people, even the lower deckers of the Cerritos, the people that are like hauling freight every day, the people that are like scrubbing things, how fulfilled are they? Things have to be done, but it's just work, and it's usually grueling work. The officers, as I mentioned, are doing things just to be recognized. They really want people that are above them to see them, witness them, and then possibly promote them. It really reminds me of having an ordinary, 9 to 5 style job, where most of the time, if you're doing things perfectly, you're doing your job perfectly, no one notices. It just doesn't matter. And people only notice you if you mess up. And I'm sure in your day-to-day life you can empathize with that because it happens to everyone. You do everything that you possibly can to make sure that your job is, being done correctly, but no one gives a shit. You just don't matter. And the only time you're really seen is if, you have a friend that's above you and they are very aware of what you're doing, or you do something to screw up, or there's one thing that you do that just really shone through, and that caused people above you to take notice of you. It is the squeaky wheel gets the grease sort of mentality. That's just how working goes. It doesn't matter what era that we're in. It can be now, it can be 100 years ago, any time. That's just how it goes. It's why the cliche of nepotism is what it is. It's because that's how moving up the ladder in any society works. You need to know someone. You need to be seen. The only way that you're going to be seen is if you are not a background character in life. Point being, for all the people in the Federation, most of them are people doing unimportant jobs that are likely not fulfilling at all, or even what their primary ambition happens to be. So if you're watching someone like Data or Geordi or Worf or whoever it happens to be, I'm sure that they are exactly where they want to be because they're on the Federation flagship, and whenever they do something, it's really important to the rest of the Federation. And everything that they do is political in nature. It's the Enterprise. But for someone like Brad Boimler on, the Cerritos, a California-class ship whose job it is to haul things around and just do the mundane busy work of the Federation, are they really being fulfilled? What is it about their lives? They're not getting any pay. They're doing it for no reason. They don't even have to be there. At any point, they can just get rid of their commission, say, I don't want to work in the Federation anymore, and the Federation has to shrug and say, okay. And they can just leave and go back to Earth and have infinite resources and do whatever they want. And presumably the people that are working Starfleet are there because that is their ambition. They're getting cut up by the Borg and assimilated. They're being targeted by Romulans and killed in secret. They're being abducted by slave traders and being stuck in human zoos and all sorts of crazy things. That's part of Lower Decks. A lot of the episodes are about it is crazy in Star Trek because there's always some crazy thing happening to us. The death rate is really high. Because, in the TV shows, it's that way because something needs to happen. Something interesting needs to occur. So something wild is always going on. But even in context of the show, during one episode, they'll say, this thing needs to be done. Let's go to this planet. And let's pursue the fleeing Klingon ship. Let's investigate this other planet that has this secret thing on it. This alien form of life that shares something in common with this other planet. So they'll travel there to this other star system. And in context of the universe, it actually takes them weeks of travel to get from one point to another. So in Star Trek, you're on board the ship, and for weeks at a time, you're not doing anything. You wake up, you press buttons, you make sure the ship is functioning, but otherwise, nothing's really going on. And that's most of your life. And you really only see the big bombastic moments that make for a good episode. Otherwise, it's a very boring, mundane existence of just ensuring that things are functioning properly. The Federation, to me, and Lower Decks specifically, feels a lot like young YouTubers trying to make content for, one or two random viewers that don't really care that they exist, and just hoping that at some point they will be able to do something that will let them be seen by someone more popular than they are so that they can climb the ladder so that one day maybe they'll have the chance to realize their ambition of being a captain. And why does everyone want to be a captain in Star Trek? It's because they're the people that get to command the ship. Whenever the ship does something, they get to take credit for it. This was my crew. I did this. Me. I'm so great. History, please remember me. I'm so great, history. Please, someone remember that I existed. Because what else do I have? And then you also have enlisted people. People that they're not even officers. They're just like people like O'Brien. That's what the video was about. Some people got on to me in the comments about how I'm underplaying how important enlisted people are. I'm not. Because in Star Trek does not care that those people exist. In the real world, like in the military, enlisted people are the people that keep everything together. The military does not work at all without enlisted people there. They are absolutely essential. And usually they're people that are the least valued. The people that have the smallest room for career growth, even though they are the ones that are keeping everything hinged together. And they're never acknowledged. And in Star Trek, that problem is really cranked up to 11. Like, people like O'Brien are famous to us, but in context of the series, they just may as well not even exist. They don't matter. Because in terms of this popularity contest of everyone competing to be a captain, they're never going to be a captain, so why do you care that they're even there? They're just doing their job, and if they're really good at being an engineer, you pat them on the back, say, you're a great engineer. Am I going to give you anything for that? No, there's no money, so congratulations, I appreciate you. And that's it. They're even lower than ensigns. An ensign can give a command to Colomini's character of O'Brien, and he has to follow it, because he's not an officer. Because he, instead of having 4 years of training, he only had 2. No, can't allow that to happen. You didn't get that extra 2 years of training, so your extra 30 years of experience, no, that goes out the window. That's pointless. You're under command of Ensign Ricky, because he had 2 more years of training at this academy that doesn't matter in the real world. That's how it works in Star Trek. So, here's a great example. There's a character of Tendi, who I'm drawing here. She is an officer. She loves new experiences. She's hyper-optimistic. Horrible things happen around her all the time, and she gets really excited about them, because she gets to do something. Everything to her is new. There's a running gag in the series that she's really obsessed with sand, because on her planet, like, she's from Orion, they don't have sand, apparently. I'm not sure how that works, but she just doesn't have sand. So anytime that she sees it, she's really excited to get to play with it. And the running gag with her is just everything is amazing. At one point in her introduction, she's manually hand-pumping someone's heart to keep them alive, because it's a cartoon, it's jocular. And at the end of the episode, they're asking her what did she think about her first day, and she says, "It was amazing, I got to pump a heart!" Because that discovery is exciting, it's amazing. In comparison, to Anna here, who I'm also drawing, see, I'm working it in. To Anna, the doctor, she's a Kaitian, she's really worn down. She's missing chunks of her ear, she's missing a part of her tail, she lost it, we don't know how she lost it. For her personal time, she vents on the holodeck with, like, ultra-violence. She does things to the holodeck characters that are hinted to be really improper. And she's really annoyed by work. At one point, in I think the first episode, the captain says, "Oh, you get to write another award-winning paper or something," and she goes, "Great, fantastic." She's apparently a really great, amazing doctor, but she doesn't want to be there. Tendi and Ta'ana are opposite ends on the spectrum of satisfaction with their jobs. In the case of Tendi and Ta'ana, both of them aren't working to be seen in the thing I've been talking about. Tendi eventually decides later on that she would like to be a captain, but for now she's just happy to be there and she's learning about everything around her. Ta'ana doesn't seem to have any ambitions at all. She seems to be at a dead end. So neither one of them are actually in this YouTube loop I'm talking about, of worrying about history, remembering them, or ascending the ladder, and so on. They're just working for their own personalized reasons. For Tendi, she's really new to the game. She's a young kid, and she hasn't identified what the meaning in her life happens to be yet. It's just an open landscape, and she's excited to be there. For T'Ana, she's older, and maybe she already hit that wall, because she doesn't really seem to be that concerned about her career. Whenever you see her enjoying things, it is usually either recreational, or she seems to mainly love helping younger officers. Because you see her interact with Tendi, and that's the most warm she ever is whenever she's making sure that the people around her are educated and uplifted. I really like both of them. I really like both these characters. So most Star Trek culture is basically obsessed with this being recognized by strangers and being recognized by history thing. I have another video called Let's Gripe About Villains. Go watch that. Make me more money. Where the intro is me doing a bit, basically, which I sort of believe, but it's, mainly because it's a villain story, about how people make up the concepts of good and evil, that there is no such thing. It's a human-created concept, that life has no inherent meaning, and even your grandchildren barely share any similarities to you on a genetic level or a cultural level. So the idea that you are going to resonate through history is purposeless, because even people like Shakespeare or Hitler or whatever, people that are really hyper-analyzed, we still don't really know them personally. They're just, words on a sheet of paper. Point being, whenever you die, you're just gone. Whether people remember you or not in a historical context does not mean anything. It's pointless. Life is essentially just an opportunity to pursue joy for yourself for some short amount of time, and then you stop existing. It's basically pointless. It's especially pointless to waste your life slaving for someone else's good time while you feel miserable. You only get your one life to live. You may as well enjoy it. For someone like Tendi, she is someone to be envied in that sense, because she loves the chance to get to experience new things. The only sort of downside to her character is that she has this need to be liked by everyone around her, so whenever you don't like her, then, she gets obsessive about it. T'Ana, meanwhile, hates being around people, for the most part. I'm not sure what her life ambitions even are, besides just staying alive. She's someone that life has beaten up on, and probably she invested too much of her time into making sure that everyone around her was supported, as a doctor, as opposed to herself. So maybe she's made some mistakes, we really don't know. I really wish we knew more about her, but oh well. She's not the main character, despite being part of the head staff of the Cerritos. But still, both of them are Starfleet officers. They did the whole 4-year course thing, and they're career-focused, for whatever the reasons. For people that are on Earth, that are not part of Starfleet, they're, a Federation citizen, but they're just living on Earth, you have to assume that they aren't career-focused, and they're just happy to stay there for whatever their personal reasons. In the video, the O'Brien video, I gave a brief example of Joseph Sisko and some other people. Joseph Sisko specifically runs a free restaurant. He's Sisko, Commander Benjamin Sisko's father. He runs a free restaurant in Louisiana, on Earth. And he even has health concerns because he's working himself too hard for this pointless job. He makes no money. He apparently has to go through the trouble of trying to acquire the resources to make meals for people. So he needs to, assuming that he's using real meat, because they make a point in a few episodes, Nog says he's able to get real worms, the things that he eats as a Ferengi. And it's a real restaurant where he's actually cooking things. It's not replicated. So I'm assuming that he's not working with replicated meat. I guess he could, I don't know. But point being, there's probably this entire network of people that have to do things like capture fish or cultivate them, and however they do that in the future. That's ethical. And then that has to be moved to his shop, where he can employ people, despite the fact that he doesn't pay them, to be waiters and such, so that he can work this thankless, payless job for people that just walk in and say, hey, I'd like some free food. And he just gives it to them. And he makes sure that they have a great time. And he gets health problems as a result, and it shortens his lifespan for no reason other than he just loves doing it. That's what he wants to do with his life. That's the meaning that he found in his life. He only gets his one life to live, but he's doing it working for other people because he chooses to do that. And even when prompted by his father, hey, stop doing this, you're killing yourself, he says no, because this is what I want to do. That, to me, is interesting. The culture of Earth is interesting because they don't have to do anything, they're just choosing to. Sure, for him, that makes sense, to some degree. He's preserving the culture of cuisine in the area that he grew up in, the things that his family found value in, and so on. Like Picard's vocation originally, cultivating grapes and so on. That also makes sense. But these are people that own their own industries, their own businesses. What about the guy that works as a waiter for Joseph Sisko? What is he getting out of it? Like, he's working his ass off, imagine being an actual waiter in the real world, and then being told, you're not going to get paid for this. Just do it because you love it. Who is going to do that? Why would you do that? What is the point of that? Now, sure, if they're holograms or something, which they're not, then that's one thing. But why would anyone make that decision? It makes no sense at all. It's a case of the show writing a situation because it looks interesting, but not thinking about it. Like, if someone can do anything with their job day to day, why are they wasting it doing something that even in the real world of today is grueling work? Now, if he has an army of waiters, like instead of having 4 or 5 waiters on staff because you can't afford to pay them, you instead have 100 guys that are doing it. Why are 100 people agreeing to be waiters? I could see a few people saying, oh, it's a great way to meet people. I bring them their food and then we have a discussion or whatever. Some people don't want to have a discussion. They don't want you around them. They're just bring me my food and get away from me. But you have 100 people doing that? It's one of those things, the more you think about it, it just makes no sense at all. Anyways, point being, this is the culture of Earth. For people that have infinite resources, no worries about money, that's what they're doing. For the daily lives of officers on a Starfleet ship, it seems also miserable. Because, again, on the Cerritos, this ship class that people don't even know exists, they're doing all this mundane work. The command staff is worrying about second contact. They're a bunch of nobodies. And then they have nobodies below nobodies who are scrubbing conduits and raking carbon off of filters and things. And no one knows that they exist. They just may as well not exist. They're doing the job that a drone should be doing. Like an actual, physical drone that someone built. That doesn't have a personality, it just exists. And these people may not even have any friends. Think of the daily lives of an officer. You wake up, you do this effective slave work, because again, you're not a flagship officer on the Enterprise. You're just doing grunge work for nobody. You're not making any money doing it. There's no tangible reward. You go back to your tiny little room that you live in, that you sleep in, with almost nothing in it, because we see in Star Trek that people don't value having possessions, because money has no value, and so on. That's the culture. So you go into your room, there's nothing in there. There's 1 or 2 decorations. You seem to barely spend any time in your actual room. Whenever we see people on TNG and DS9 and so on, they're almost never in their rooms. They're doing their jobs. And then they go home very briefly. And they go home to no one in most cases. O'Brien has a family, he has a wife and a kid, 2 kids. But that's the exception. For most officers, they don't have any loved ones. And we even see, when people use the holodeck, they will often just fall asleep in there, and no one even notices. So apparently, even the holodecks are really not that in demand. And there's no TV. It's been stated that TV fell out of use sometime in the 21st century. There's no, YouTube shorts or anything in the future, certainly. These people just sit around in their rooms reading Shakespeare and listening to Mozart because Roddenberry thought that it made them look smart. As mentioned, relationships aren't really much of a thing. They don't get involved in romances. The staff doesn't have any time for it. So to me, for the officers, life to me seems totally joyless and directionless. And there's no sense of community behind it. People just wake up, do their boring jobs of pressing buttons, scanning for things, not really engaging in any sort of friendships, not having any hobbies. They do that all day long. They get off shift, and then they might, play the clarinet or something. All these more cliche hobbies that are meant to showcase that they're working for, self-edification. And that's it. That's all they do. And the payoff is that they have a show where they're like, hey, come listen to me play clarinet and 10 forward. And they do, and people go, oh, very nice. Very good. That's pretty good. And then they'll, have a work relationship dinner together where they eat, but they aren't friends. Even the end of All Good Things in TNG is Picard learning, I need to take this stick out of my ass. I'm going to play poker with the rest of my staff. And even the staff that are playing poker together, they're not really good friends. This is just something that they're kind of doing, in their downtime whenever they're not working on the bridge. It all seems very, very empty to me. So Star Trek is supposed to be this ideal future where humanity got over money and poverty and drug addiction, these other things that people worry about today. But honestly, it's just as bad in context as being some nobody YouTuber. You're working for no end for the sake of popularity from people that don't matter. Now, I'm glad that Star Trek is this idealized future. It's supposed to be this hopeful presentation of the future. But if you start thinking about it too much, you realize this future is actually probably nightmarish. If you're on ground level, day-to-day doing things in Star Trek, it's miserable. It really is. It makes me think of that in this culture, if you are content with your life, it's probably because of the way that you're raised. It's probably because it's not emphasized how important relationships or acquisition happens to be. And I think there probably is a lot of truth to... It's a distinction on how we are raised in the real world, because I put a lot of emphasis on things like community because of the fact that I didn't have any when I was growing up. So just as an example in that case, I place more importance on that than some other people might. Some people don't care about having too many friends because that's just not important to them, for whatever the reasons. And a lot of that is determined by how you were raised. So even something like culture can be so different, so alien to us, that in Star Trek, yes, to us that seems depressing, but to them it isn't because of how they were raised. They have context. So in Star Trek, children are probably raised and told how evil wanting things is, just wanting to acquire things. Even sometimes people might have a preoccupation with wanting things. Their culture is telling them every day how bad that is. And how important captains and scientists are to their culture, even though they know nothing about them personally. So it could just be a case of all humans are just raised with this preoccupation, so to them it's important, and maybe that's enough to keep them motivated going through their careers and their life, before the ennui sets in, and they realize, oh, that was never important. Like it did with Tana, maybe that's it, just... Everyone is just going a mile a minute until they get to the age of someone like Picard. And they realize, oh shit, I need to play poker. I think of Picard specifically. In, say, the episode Tapestry, when Q prevents him from being stabbed in the back by that Nausicaan, Blade Damja Human. Picard lives this alternate life of safety, where he gets really preoccupied with playing his career out passively and not getting into big risks. And we see him the same age as a actor in his 50s, as an old junior lieutenant. He's roaming around giving people data pads as a junior lieutenant, the lowest rank that's still above an ensign. And he's a man in his 50s. So Picard goes to Riker, this alternate Riker, and asks, what can I do to be elevated? Because I'm even thinking about becoming a captain one day. And of course Riker looks at this 50-year-old junior lieutenant and is like, seriously? now? A little bit late, isn't it? Riker says that he has done his job in his career, but he's never stood out. So even in the context of the setting, that's what happens whenever you don't stand out, whenever you don't do something like marvelous. You just don't get promoted. So like I was saying before, in our careers now, that's what happens. You can do your job perfectly every day, but you just don't get noticed, so you don't get promoted. Same thing happens in Star Trek. In this alternate future, Picard just never did anything marvelous. He did his job very reliably, but he stayed a junior lieutenant for decades. Decades! That is ridiculous. Like, he never got promoted by being consistent? To me, that's insane. His career, his entire career stagnated. I know it's like an alternate future created by Q, but it seems to be, true to form. Q wouldn't just lie to him. It's not really Q's MO. He's not a liar. Even in Voyager, they point out, you're not a liar. And he goes, oh, you actually found my one redeeming quality. But the inverse of that is he was a little bit more reckless in his actual life. And he did get stabbed in the back, and he did lose his heart, and he did need an artificial heart because of the Dalskins. And he did play his career fast and loose with lots of risks, for the most part. But the end result of that was, yes, he became a captain of the Federation flagship, but he doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have a wife. Anytime that he got close to having a real relationship with someone, he either lost them or he had to effectively separate from them because of his career, or because it was too dangerous, so they couldn't be together. And he has no children. And in the movies, whenever he learns that his nephew and his brother and his wife died in a fire, he breaks down in tears because he realizes his family line is now over. There's nothing left for his family. Like, there's the vineyard, the Picard vineyard back in France that now is just unoccupied. There's no one there, continuing the traditions of his family line. Because here he is in space living out his dream of being a captain, with no friends, no family, no loved ones, no one really caring about him. But he's a captain, though. History's going to remember him. And that's his other endpoint. So it's... You see what I'm getting at? How miserable this seems in context. I don't think the future of Star Trek is actually a good future. It actually seems pretty miserable. The rigidity of command structure and the need to do grunt work, it sounds very tiring, it sounds very lonely and very empty. And even when you quote-unquote win, in this crowd of millions of people that are trying to compete to either get into the Academy, to get into Starfleet, and it narrowing down into being a handful of people that matter, and you become a captain or an admiral, the idea of you is admired, but you're otherwise just a name in a book. You don't actually matter. And even then, something like a Borg attack happens, and all these best of the best of the best that, the Academy only accepts a certain number of people each year, and it only accepts the very top students. They go on to be officers aboard Starfleet ships. And then the Borg come and then blow them all up. Like a good 40 ships or something just go away. So presumably then their criteria for who gets to be an officer lowers dramatically after that. So presumably even if you manage that, then you'd still run into the same exact problem, except now you're the second best of the best. And you have like say Voyager, the TV show Voyager. Voyager was just a mundane, long-range exploration vessel, a Starfleet ship. It was not a Cerritos, it wasn't a C-grade ship, it was still a B-grade ship with a B-grade crew. The people on board Voyager, they're important to us, presumably, because it's a TV show. They're not the best of the best. So when you question why do they do things, that's an out-of-world explanation. Why are they screwing up so badly when a TNG crew would have fixed the problem this way? They're a B-grade crew. They're not that good. And presumably they are a crew that was assembled after the Borg attacks, so even then they're the B-grade of the B-grade. If you've ever thought about that before. So point being, I'm not sure how satisfying that is to history or satisfying to you, knowing that you only got in on a technicality, because the Borg showed up and wiped out half your fleet. Anyways, it seems like this future really only appeals to people that have monomania. and don't care about community, specifically on board Starfleet ships. But if you have this monomania and you're willing to work your ass off to jump up the ladders and make zero money in the process, earn nothing, accrue nothing, have nothing to show for it at the end of your life, you have no family, no friends, but you are a name in a history book because you did so-and-so when the Borg attacked or when the Romulans attacked or something. You made peace with the Klingons or something. You're a name in a book now. Wow. What an empty life that must actually be, if you really think about it. But it probably appeals to people that really love that have that monomania, and they're just obsessed with it because their culture told them that it was important. Point being, this is what I started thinking about whenever I was doing my Lower Decks video. And I could not piece it together and wrap it back around to being positive, and that's the reason why I started re-recording it. Because I was down at the time, so that was really coming out too strongly. I don't know if you can actually make an idealized future, as far as creating a setting. I like Star Trek as it is. I'm not complaining about Star Trek. It's just, if you think about it, it gets bad. If I was writing an idealized future, a modified Star Trek, I would want more community and more friendships, and have that be more the focus, like humanity being more the focus. What's actually important to real people, not this rigid, militarized command structure where if you're the captain, you have to eschew having friendships because you need to be presented as being larger than life. So as a result, you become alienated to everyone around you for the sake of running a ship where you're not getting paid. Who cares? But then ships probably wouldn't run very well if you're creating this weird, potentially libertarian ship where no one does anything unless they want to. You'd have to drastically alter the setting to be more like the Age of Technology in Warhammer 40,000 or something, where everything is mundane and automated by AI that just run everything. And then that becomes a different kind of nightmare future. So when it comes to writing something like TNG, it's one of those things where it's best not to think about it too much. Because if you do think about it too much, it becomes a real problem of how exactly do you write a marvelous future technology-focused, science-focused society for humans where they are happy and fulfilled, but it's not isolating and dystopic for some other cultural reason. I think about studies that show that people, no matter what their job is, tend to only work about 3 to 5 hours a day, at most. And they spend the rest of the day just trying to find ways to avoid working and trying to find ways to minimize the amount of energy that is, lost in the process. That's why they say whenever you have crunch time, it actually makes the problem much worse because you're paying people overtime and you're not actually getting good work out of them. Whenever you only make people work about 5 hours a day, they are very productive. And whenever you stretch that out, it actually results in the exact same amount of work being done with greater cost. And it just makes them more depressed over the long run, and it just ruins your ability to be productive. Which is why, like the old American cliches of, people complaining about their workers being lazy and so on, the mindset that some people have of working their workers to death and trying to make them more productive and, denying them bathroom breaks and watching their every move to try to increase productivity, it never works. Every study shows that. It never, ever works. It's the stupidest thing you can do because people are hardwired to behave a certain way. We are primates that are wired behaviorally to work enough to eat every day, and we spend the rest of the time either sleeping or having fun. That's what humans are. And, we have a modern culture where we have to do certain things, we have responsibilities and so on. But we are wired to do that. So if you have a perfect setting, it has to be oriented around what humans are now. Unless you create a transhumanistic setting that just alters our behavior so that we don't have to worry about it. In which case, you can just manufacture people to be drones and make them work, and then they are just programmed to really enjoy working their asses off. You can do that, but to me, that's becoming cyberpunk, and it's becoming very, kind of Matrixy, dystopian in a completely different way. So, not going to do that either. So in actual, like an actual Starfleet setting like this, people would probably only work about 3 to 4 hours doing very specialist research, and maybe even have rules that force them into having recreational time. And for some people that wouldn't work because they are too obsessed with working. It just depends on the person. There's no perfect way to do this. You could go this sort of transhumanistic route in a more organic way. Let's say that in the future we have totally mapped the human brain, and we have the future technology to be able to just inject someone with something, like nanites, whatever, Borg nanoprobes. That's what Voyager does with every problem. Just Borg nanoprobes, problem solved. And you could just switch off depression. If someone has something wrong with them, you could just, turn it off or turn it on. You can inject someone with Borg nanoprobes and turn on their satisfaction. Like they just really love working now. Whatever it is. But it doesn't really solve the problem. This, everything I'm talking about, this is all just the human condition. We're all wired to be dissatisfied to some degree, because that's what propels us forward. If you're lonely, you want to find a partner, and that might result in a kid. That's what evolution has created in us. We're sort of wired to be unhappy to some degree, because that's what propels us to do things. And that's also what creates a wide range of behaviors with people. Some people's solutions to their dissatisfaction is community. For some people, it's inventing something, popularity. That's one element of Star Trek. These wide ranges of human behaviors help us as a species to evolve and to sustain ourselves and to make sure that we propagate. Because the more wide range of behaviors that we have, the more ways that we have of focusing our energies, the more successful as a species that we are. It's all suited for evolution, so there's no perfect society that you can create in fiction. There's just cultures that help people to find personal satisfaction no matter what it happens to be. So, wrapping this all the way back around to Lower Decks, why am I talking about this? And I made sure to write it down so I could actually bring this all together. That's why I'm re-recording. I think that Lower Decks is a great portrayal of Star Trek ideals, because it nails the culture. Like Star Trek Discovery and Picard Seasons 1 and 2 specifically, I think fall flat on their face for a lot of reasons. Most of it is cultural. It doesn't nail what Star Trek is. And you can argue in the comment section about that. I don't care. This is my opinion. In Lower Decks, specifically, the crew are very uplifting to one another and show everyone's support. There are multiple episodes where someone, like say, there's a great example of the engineer Rutherford. He's one of the main characters, one of the 4 main characters. He starts trying to alter his career in an effort to spend more time with Tendi because something was important to her, because he's just, he's a little bit of a pushover early on. And he moves from like command to the science division, trying to do medical, to being like part of security and so on. And each time he moves, he finds that he's kind of good at one element of it, but he's not good entirely at it, or it's not something he really enjoys. And he wants to get back in those Jeffrey tubes and do some mundane, like grease monkey work, because that's what he loves to do for his own reasons. And each time that he moves from job to job, he expects the senior staff that is above him to say, "What, you don't want to be here? Like, what's wrong with you? You got here and now suddenly all the time I spent training you is worthless?" What you would expect from a real job. But that doesn't happen. The senior staff of each division says, "That's great. I'm so happy for you, because you are pursuing what is important to you. And the fact that I was able to contribute to that in some way to help you realize what is most valuable to your time and your career path that will make you the happiest makes me happy, knowing that you have, that I helped to fulfill that for you." And then he just moves on to his next optional career path, and he explores that. And me and my girlfriend like calling each other Baby Bear, because we got this from Lower Decks. Shax refers to Rutherford as Baby Bear, because the pack of his security is called the Bears. And that's just meant to be an uplifting, warm, fulfilling thing. It's that, to me, that's what Star Trek should be. It's not just people working their asses off because we want to explore the unknown. Like that's fine. That's a good part of their culture. But it's also the more humanistic, grounded, human-focused, like everyday life satisfaction-focused elements that Star Trek often does not even touch on. And Lower Decks, honestly, is the only series that does that. Granted, sometimes like the senior staff can not really seem to care too much about the people around them because they're a little bit too up their own butts, and that's part of the joke. But most of the time that you see members of Starfleet interacting with one another, even if they're off the Cerritos, they are genuinely really preoccupied with ensuring that everyone is supported and cared for in some way. And to me, that is the future of a perfect society. Lower Decks in many ways is the best showcasing of culture from Star Trek, and that even includes the original series in TNG and DS9. That's more close to how I would envision a perfect human society than TOS and TNG show it to be. There's a large emphasis on self-care, self-actualization, personalizing your own goals, and not just wanting the biggest chair. There are plenty of characters in Lower Decks that don't want to be a captain. Even Tendi eventually realizes, oh, I would like to be captain, but it's something that she eventually realizes through her own exploration of the things around her. And there's many characters that don't care about it. The fact that it's an animated comedy means it can be sort of a non-literal canon. So whenever you see things happen, those things historically, within the context of, canon Star Trek, are happening, but it's not literal. So it's a bit like seeing a film show, but through this comedy lens. And that's to its strength. So you can take things that happened in previous series and make meta references about them, and you don't really have to take it that seriously, but it's still happening. So when someone, references Lower Decks years from now and says this happened, the Packlet planet had this disaster happen to it, whatever it happens to be, you can say historically that did happen, and then you can point to Lower Decks, but also say Lower Decks is a comedy though, so whenever you see that it happened, it didn't literally happen this way, you're seeing it through the lens of it being a comedy. And I really like that. It's why it's so disappointing to me that it's only getting 5 seasons. You don't want it to go on too long. To me, the perfect amount of seasons for any TV show is usually 6 or 7. It really depends on the writers. Usually how TV shows go is season 1 is a little bit rough. They're trying to work out exactly what it should be and how everyone should be. And then season 2 is where it starts to kind of hit its stride, but it's still not quite there. And this is true of Lower Decks too. Season 1 is a little bit wonky. Halfway through season 1, it gets much better. It starts to hit its stride in season 2, and it basically is perfected in season 3. And that's true of TNG and DS9. I don't know about TOS. TOS is a little bit different of a situation. It's not true in Voyager. Voyager kind of it starts a little bit wonky. It gets fairly okay in season 2, and then it starts wobbling, and it gets bad, and it stays bad. And it kind of, ever so often, it does something where you think it's going to improve, and then it just gets bad again. It's Voyager. But typically, for shows where the people really love the thing that they're working on, which is the problem with Voyager, you could tell that the writers were kind of just doing what they needed to do. No one really loved Voyager when they were working on it. Not that I don't like Voyager to some degree, I'm not trying to trash on it. But it had problems. For Lower Decks, I imagine it following that same format, so I'd love to get it one more season at least. It's getting season number 5. I wish it could get 6. I feel like it is loved enough by its writers that it could easily do 7, maybe even 8, but it probably should stop around 6 or 7. So, if we could get a little bit more, I would be very pleased by that. But anyways, it is a comedy-filtered presentation of Star Trek. And that helps sell the idea of this heroic, idealized future. Because since you're seeing it through the lens, you can very easily project onto it whatever it is that you need to see. Since it's not literally being depicted, you can imagine it playing out however you would like it to play out, as far as it being more realistic. I talk a lot about projection in writing and why it's so important. Because whenever you involve the watcher or the reader in the process, and they have to start imagining things, it personalizes it. And whenever they personalize it, then it becomes very vital and integral to them. And that's something that is really hard to manufacture. So Lower Decks sort of involuntarily does that, and that's one of its great advantages. I did the O'Brien video, and I made a point of O'Brien must suffer. I did a whole section of that. And during the airing of it, I was watching the live chat, and I saw one person at least say, I might have to stop watching this. Because there's people that, they have like mental disorders, or even they're just not feeling it, and they don't want to watch something like that, of just listing out all the bad things that happened to him. Because it's rough. It's O'Brien. He gets it really bad. It's terrible. And that's part of the joke, but it also, in context, it is awful. Because there's only so many times that you can watch Miles get tortured, or the rest of the crew just go through all this shit, and accept that no one has severe PTSD from all the things that they go through? It's ridiculous. But in Lower Decks, it's cartoon violence, and that washes out some of the reality of it. And as a result, it sort of lets you have it all. You don't have to worry about people having PTSD whenever so much of it is comical. That's why I think that Lower Decks is one of the best portrayals of Star Trek. Because not only are you getting the decades of stuff that has been built up by it, you're getting people that really grew up with it and love having watched it, and that love of the series is being translated into each episode, and you're getting it through this perfect lens where you can project whatever you want onto it. It's a great format. Now, my Patreon barely keeps me alive and away from the nightmare of bridge officer life, of waking up to go to work and nothing else. I was not fitted for office jobs, because whenever I go to work, and I don't really like communicating with people because it's really hard for me to mentally integrate work relationships into personal relationships. So whenever I had office jobs, I was miserable because I felt like I couldn't connect to anyone. I didn't find the work fulfilling, and whenever I got home, I was just exhausted and I had nothing. It was a miserable life. That's the reason why I'm willing to continue doing this sort of work, just barely putting things together, the Patreon barely keeping me afloat, because I'm much happier doing this sort of thing, even though it's still, dystopian, as I put it. This modern world of content creation. I don't want a future resembling YouTube, with everyone obsessed with being the most famous person. I don't want Admiral Mr. Beast. Fuck that. I don't want Star Trek to just be people climbing the rungs so that they can be the most popular to a community of people that don't really care about them as people. It's just, they got to the top. They're the most bloated YouTube channel, so that's what's the most important to them. It's ridiculous. I don't like that at all. To me, it's far more reasonable for a future to be about manufacturing excitement for advancement in the unknown and communal accomplishments. I'm not sure you can get human nature and our programmed sort of need to establish hierarchies in our communities out of our behavior for a fictional, future, culture. How you do that, I don't know. Realistically, it would probably involve a lot of studies and experiments to determine how we are programmed to behave, and then acknowledging that, and then trying to guide ourselves culturally so that we sort of flow very evenly into that future. If we can do that, I don't know. And even then, I imagine it would probably involve having to divide our communities into very specific microcultures, and that might divide us even more. I don't know. It's a really complicated, futurist thing to think about. I'm sure that there's a book series somewhere that goes into this. I don't care that much. I'm just talking. Humans too easily latch on to projected importance, and having massive populations of trillions of people means you place too much importance on the idea of super people who have become amazingly famous for usually the stupidest of reasons. It makes me think of things like Michael Jackson. You were not around for this, most of you people. Back in the 1980s, Michael Jackson was just the king of everything. He was everywhere. He was the most popular person on the planet. You might think about, Taylor Swift is probably more famous. No, nowhere even remotely close. He dominated the entire world culture at the time. It was ridiculous. I think about things like that. I think about things like Princess Di passing away and people just rending their clothes and crying for this person that they didn't know. It was just the idea of this nice lady that was really involved in the welfare of other people, who was a princess. And just that idea was enough to send some people spiraling out of control mentally after she passed away. That's how humans are. If you have the idea of someone, then people will project whatever they want onto it. And that's very dangerous. It can be very helpful, but it's very dangerous. It's how you get heroes. It's how you get villains. It's something I think about a lot. And when you have trillions upon trillions of human beings alive in some sort of future, that becomes even more dangerous. Because if someone is so outrageously popular that everyone knows about them, trillions of people know about them, then it becomes that much more of a complication. So I can see why their culture is so preoccupied with animals and scientists and so on. Because the idea of them is more potent to a huge group of people than it would be to what humans are more wired for, which is a group of about 100 people. Where you can have there have been studies that show that we can only have like a friend groups that barely exceed about 100 people. After that, you can't mentally remember anything about the people that you're interacting with. We're wired for that. Small tribal little camps, and that's it. And without getting in the transhumanism where you try to fix those problems with people, then you have to wire our culture around those problems. Like I said, working people harder does not work because we're just wired not to. And any sort of future advancements in society have to get around people thinking, oh, people are just lazy, blah, 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 blah. You got to get past that sort of brain-dead caveman mentality of just hit things harder. That's one of the struggles of modern American society is this more like brute force caveman mentality of thinking you have common sense when common sense actually doesn't make any sense. Of, I'll just make them work harder because they're lazy. That doesn't work. Recently I got called for jury duty and I was sitting in the room waiting for 2 hours. And I heard some people behind me of a more conservative mindset who were saying that it was them Chinese games that are ruining our kids. If we just stop China from sending us video games, it'll fix everything. And they were talking about a guy that was in his 50s that still played video games. And the lady that this other guy was talking to, well, that's not a real man right there. That's no man. And it kind of just made me realize there's still so many people like this. They just don't get it, and they're not going to get it. It's all cultural. That's the reason why we struggle with scientific advancement, because there's people that think they have common sense. Because they're projecting all these little insecurities and everything else that they have brought with them. And the only real way to fix things like that is it being cultural. And so ground level that small microcultures can sort of bring everyone up individually, and then those smaller cultures can integrate with larger ones and move up from there. And I don't know if it's possible. It's a really complicated subject that I am not qualified to talk about. But it's still interesting, so I'll still talk about it, even though I'm not qualified to. So, these little Star Trek ships are sort of microcosms of culture and importance, when I think about it like that. They are their own little tiny communities. Usually there's no more than a few hundred people on board a Starfleet ship, unless they're just massive. Even the Galaxy, I think, only had a crew of about 800 or so people, even though it could support carrying thousands. Most of it was empty. If you see people walking around a Galaxy-class ship, most of the time it's just empty hallways. It's actually kind of creepy. So for a smaller ship like the Cerritos, this little California class, which is still a fairly big ship, but it's not that big, it's actually a fantastic place to see actual Star Trek. Because of this lens of it being a comedy and so on I talked about, it's kind of blurry. And it matches the uncertainty of what the future could actually be. And maybe more importantly, because it is small, and because it is isolated to some degree, and people have to work together to survive, you get to see that more communal focused nature of what it would probably be like to work in this future of Star Trek, where it is more concerned with mental health as opposed to the unknown, which is really honestly what I would like to see more of in future iterations of Star Trek. Not just seeing things that we haven't seen before because you're taking the original concept of Star Trek for Gene Roddenberry was described to him as a wagon train to the stars. Because back whenever he made it, shows were popular about going out to the Old West, and he wanted to take that up into space. So that was the concept. Just, we're going out into space, we don't know what's out there, and we're going to run into some crazy things. And that was really great for the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, even. But as time goes on, we're more preoccupied with more modern advancements, more modern sensibilities of how we move forward as a culture. And back in the 50s and 60s, that was more technology focused, because they were looking towards like the moon and thinking about Mars colonies and things like that. Whereas now it's more cultural issues. How do we fix ourselves as a people? How do we make sure that people are more focused on learning and advancement and growing individually? So whenever I think about Star Trek and how that's going to move forward, I think about that. And Lower Decks is a great way of portraying that, because whenever you watch it, you have a good time. Even if someone goes through something horrible, it's through this comedic lens. It is a perfect way to portray Star Trek to a new generation of people. And I really hope that they somehow manage to get a season 6, maybe even season 7, or maybe the team sticks together and makes a new series that is similar in some ways. Or at least, if we don't have that, people at least take away some good lessons from Lower Decks, and that translates into whatever new series that we're going to get from it. Even if it's a different series that has nothing to do with Star Trek at all. It's a really good series. I would recommend watching it. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But it's what we need. And by the way, this re-recording actually went on way longer than the original. The original was like an hour and 10 minutes. I apologize. Alright. Thank you guys for watching my little commentary. Hope you enjoyed the drawing. I'll see you guys next time. Contribute to my Patreon, ensure I don't die. So long, everyone. Bye-bye.